Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the marvellous Sajni Haria. We are talking about anxiety and the PhD, and Sajni shares her own experiences of how to manage that anxiety during the PhD process. We talk about journaling, we talk about weekends, and we also talk about how seeing your PhD from the top down can help to manage overwhelm. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Sajni.
Hi, nice to finally meet you.
I know, we've been emailing backwards and forwards,
Yes.
and I feel like I've got to know you a little bit, and it is really lovely to actually meet you properly now. Thank you so much, because you reached out to me to talk about, said that you'd be happy to talk about your experiences, and I'm always so grateful for people doing that, because first of all, I know that's not always an easy thing to do, but I also know how much it is appreciated by other people. Just before we started recording, we were saying how much we wish there'd been people talking about these kinds of things before, when we were doing our PhDs, and so I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you taking the time, so thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Well, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
And I always start by quizzing people. So to tell us a little bit about your journey into and through the PhD.
Okay, so my journey was very, very mixed. I'm sure many people have gone through similar feelings that I went through. It was definitely a roller coaster. But the first thing I want to say before diving in is that now, looking back on my journey and my PhD, I'm so happy and incredibly proud of myself for persevering through those tough moments. And for anyone who is going through that right now, just know that just push through it, because you're not going to regret it at the end, and you will look back on your journey and you'll think of all the good things that you did, and you won't be feeling bad on all the tough moments. So I just want to say that first.
That's gorgeous. And I think that's so important, isn't it, that you want to remember that you will look back on the good times. I always encourage people to have like a PhD bucket list in terms of the things that they want to experience, so that you can look back on that and go, yeah, that was a time when I did what it is. Love that. What fantastic advice. Thank you. So tell us, it was mixed. Tell us about the mixedness.
So I got into it because I did my undergraduate master's in chemistry at the University of Birmingham, and I did a master's project in a research group. And the reason I got into my PhD was because I absolutely loved what I was doing, but it was more about the application of what I was doing. My project was essentially beneficial for targeted cancer therapy. So that's what really motivated me, knowing that my research could potentially impact people's lives.
Amazing.
Thank you. That's the reason why I got into it. And with the current role that I have been doing, I think it's incredible what people do with research. So that's how I got into it. And I would say that my first year was very happy. It was very like, I have all this training, I have all these new things I'm doing, I'm learning how to use these new instruments, and I'm starting off my project, pushing it forward. And I'd say I probably halfway through, I got through that year, is when things started not to work and it was getting a bit repetitive. I know many of my friends have also gone through these feelings. So I think that's when the pressure, when I started to feel pressure, it became more of a challenging environment. And it's not just you do your project, you have teaching commitments, you have master students who you're supervising, you might be doing more than one project. There's just so many things that you're doing. And I think it's really important. Well, I wish that I started thinking like this before. Think of it like a job, because I didn't have industry experience. I went straight from my undergraduate to a PhD. So I've never had this outside perspective. I think it's so easy to get stuck into a student mindset where it's constant go, 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 always in the details, always deep in your work. And a PhD is very different. When something doesn't work, you dive in deeper, you find out why it doesn't work. It's very different in a normal job. In a normal job, you might move on to something that does work and brings in money. I think that's one thing I would say is look at it like a job, because the weekend's there for you to pause. It's there for you to take a break. So use it. And if you're having a hard day, just think of your next day as a fresh start. Don't go into the next day feeling demotivated, because it's so easy to do that. And that's what I got stuck into, this cycle. I think, yeah, definitely. I think that's what happened to me. But what I did do once it started affecting me a bit more in my day-to-day life, the feeling of anxiety, stress management, not feeling it and being demotivated essentially, I started going to Wellbeing sessions at the university, and I highly recommend doing something like this, even if you don't have anxiety or you don't have anything affecting you. I think it's just so nice. There's something so nice talking to someone who you don't know and having an outside perspective on what you're going through, having some reassurance. It's always nice to be reassured that you're not doing things wrong, and it's okay to have certain feelings.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm a bit biased because I'm a therapist, but I think that sense of, as you say, you put so eloquently, in terms of having another perspective, another set of eyes, and somebody to kind of just listen and say, yeah, that's normal. That's okay, because what we all know is we are harder on ourselves than we would ever be on anybody else. We say horrible things to ourselves that we would never utter. And so actually to have somebody listen and to counteract that voice, that internal critic, and help you to turn the volume down on that, I think is brilliant, really brilliant. So you talked about anxiety. We're going to kind of dive into that a bit deeper in a minute, but there was so much good stuff in there that you said in terms of the first year being kind of good. And then I think lots of people will relate to this messy middle bit, bit where lots of things come into play and it starts to, the pressure starts to build. And just being aware of these phases of the PhD, because I think people begin the PhD and expect all the PhD to be like that. You're going to go through phases, and just know that that's part of the journey. I think that's really useful to remember. And this idea of taking breaks and having time, that it can't be constant. Because I think, as you say, being a student coming from, and probably if you're on a PhD, you've been a very successful undergrad student. Actually, that way that many people work on an undergrad or even a master's program, in terms of going for it constantly, it's not going to cut it on a PhD. Really.
No, you'll find yourself feeling stuck sometimes, and I mean I find myself feeling guilty so many times because I was taking a break. I was taking a week off. You're allowed to take a week off. It's there for you to pause, reset, do something for yourself, because when you come back, you hopefully you'll be more productive.
Yes, absolutely. And I think sometimes it can help to look at the kind of the standard holidays that are given at the university, and because sometimes we need that external verification, so that sense of coming, well, look, everyone else at the university is on holiday, like we've just come out of the Christmas holidays, and I know this is a really difficult time for some people in terms of when do I stop and when do I keep working, but kind of going, well, there are national bank holidays, there are discretionary days that universities give. You would get so many days holiday a year, and just know that that's there and that's on the statute books, and so that's okay for you to take time too. I think that's really, really important. Thank you for reminding us of that. So let's come back then to anxiety, because that was something that we thought particularly you could talk about. So you had your own experience of that. I wondered if you wanted to say any more about that, or we just kind of take that. Yeah.
So as I said, that halfway through is when I started doing something a bit more about it. I started going to Wellbeing sessions. The thing I took away from that, because I only had a couple, was I started writing in a journal, and it was sort of an outlet for me. Whenever something happened, something tough happened, maybe a bad experiment, for example, I wrote it down in my journal, and maybe a couple of days I would look at what I wrote and I would think, okay, I didn't need to react that way. It's all fine now. You're fine. So it was a sort of a way of reflection, and just realizing that moment was, my mind was not thinking in the right way, which is fine. But now you're fine, so you don't need to worry.
I love the journaling so much. I love it. And like you say, in terms of being a place where you can put it all there and you can kind of have a look at it and come back and have a conversation with yourself. Exactly. And again, PhD, there's a brilliant book called Why Smart People Hurt, which I haven't read all of. I do have to confess this. It's great. But it's talking about how smart people, which we are doing PhDs, have brilliant brains. They are brilliant. They're switched on. They are super creative. And the amazing thing about having a creative, imaginative, creative brain is that you think up all these new ideas. That's what you're doing as a PhD. The problematic part of having a brilliant brain is it is really able to quickly conjure all sorts of fear casting, what's going to happen in the future, what this means. Like, it's firing and it's super clever. So it's kind of, it's coming up with all these really convincing arguments about why you're never going to finish your PhD and why it's going to turn out like this. So this sense of actually being able to process that, slow it down, I think is brilliant. And as you say, this journaling practice, awesome. And did you have a special book or a special time, or is it just as it comes?
It's really interesting you said that, actually, because I admittedly wasn't that good with journaling at this point. It was a habit that I didn't stick to consistently, but eventually I got to a good point during my lab time in my research where I felt so much better in myself. But then the pandemic happened. Right. Fortunately for me, I just finished my lab work, so all I had left to do was to write my thesis. Right. But yes, I felt so isolated, being at home alone. I mean, my partner goes to work every day, but I'm still home alone in the day, and I was also away from my family. So it was a very tough time, and although it was probably actually the toughest time in terms of my anxiety and my journey, but it was also the most important part of my journey, because I think this is the time I felt I grew the most personally. It really forced me to pause. If I, for example, have an anxiety attack, it really forced me to think, okay, you can't feel guilty about this one day that took you away from your work. You need to learn how to recover from this, learn methods that are really good for you, try different things. So this is when I really spent time listening to podcasts. I even tried a bit of meditation, so many different things to find what really works for me. And ironically, it was after I submitted my thesis that I really felt I got it. But the two important things was I spent a lot of time on myself, which meant that when I did get to a good point in my writing up, I felt good. And the second thing was a really good support system. I'm really lucky to have my family were there on the phone all the time. I was calling them crying, like, oh, this didn't work. And they were always there on the phone to me and my friends. So I think having a support system, not only in your PhD, even your life after your PhD, it's just so important. These are the people who are going to help you. They were there to see the light at the end of the tunnel for me at times that I couldn't.
Absolutely. Oh, blimey. Well, we can't do it on our own, can we? That's the fallacy that you could do it on your own. And I love that you talked about, you were talking to yourself, that positive self-talk in terms of really taking yourself by the hands and being a good friend to yourself. And I love that. And I love that you said about kind of getting yourself to a place where you felt good about yourself. I always say it, you know, the PhD is a personal development program, and you get a thesis as a kind of bonus. But actually, you're on a journey. It's a personal development journey. And I think that, like you said, finding things, what you've said about finding things that suit you is brilliant. And I also just want to reflect back in terms of you saying, oh, you're not very good at journaling. It's like it really, because I think a lot of people feel like that. It's not an exam. It's like, if it suits you, if it helps you, brilliant. If it helps you, brilliant. And it might be that you journal so much for 1 week and then you just know it's there, but you don't have to beat yourself up because you're not doing it every day, because it isn't what we're looking for. What it sounds like you found in a really great way is things that would support you rather than feeling like another burden, another thing to have to do, is actually supporting you.
Exactly.
And I love your resourcefulness. I think that's really inspiring in terms of trying out different things, gathering material in. How amazing is that? Anything else about, because you said then you had this sort of period of reflection on what you'd learned. Anything else from there?
So that's one thing I wanted to say was with the journaling, during my PhD, I wasn't in a consistent habit of doing it. But what I did found that's because I didn't know what to journal. Right. I didn't know where to start. Right. And I see so many people post it on Instagram, and they have, you know, they're writing I just didn't know, and it wasn't feeling right for me. Right. But in the end, what I found what works for me is I don't always do it every day, maybe weekly or weeks, every couple weeks. Yeah. I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, which really brings you back to like the present, you know, what the big picture is about. 3 affirmations. I don't always do that, but when I feel like it, I do. And I think the important thing, which really helps me and look at myself in a positive way, is I reflect on what I've done since the last time I journaled. I write down everything that I did was successful. And it can be as simple as I went to the gym 3 times a week, or I cooked a really delicious meal, or it could be about your PhD. I passed my Viva. I wrote a chapter, or I did a successful experiment. It can be as big or as small as you want, but it's really important to look at all your wins, because it's so easy to always think about the negatives. And I mean, when I reviewed my year, I had to look at my phone just to remember the photos on my phone, just to remember some of the things I did, because you'd be surprised how many things we forget. Yeah. So I always do that. And then what I do is what I'm going to do better in the next week. And next to it, I write the action of how I'm going to do it. So I think I have this record, a monthly record or whatever, that allows me to help me always improve myself personally or professionally. So I think that's important, that personal growth. And what helps me do it is reflection.
Love it. I think we all need a bit of Sajni in our ears, right?
Oh, thank you.
Reminding us, no, this is gorgeous, really gorgeous, in terms of coming into the present, because of course that's the fear casting. That's how brilliant brain's putting us into the future and the catastrophes. Coming into the present. Then you were talking about your affirmations and this positive affirmation for yourself and what you've done that was great. Oh, I love it. I love it. So I'm going to ask now this unfair question, which I ask everybody, in terms of, do you have a top tip or some top tips for us?
Yes. So the main thing is, whatever stage you are at of your PhD, start now. Start learning about yourself now, because you will get to a stage at some point in life, whether it's not your PhD, whether it's after it, that there will be tough times. So start now, so you have measures in place to help yourself, and to know that things are always going to get better. This is just a PhD. It's not meant to be easy, right? Yeah. So have that support, whatever it is that works for you, support system, reflection, whatever it is, journaling, taking time, just do it all, learn about yourself, so it's there to help you when you need it. And the second thing I would say, specifically about your PhD, what really helped me was when I felt overwhelmed. This is something I did in my write-up stage. Always look at your project top this is what I did. Always look at my project top down. So if you have 3 main objectives for one project, write them down and then branch down into details. Don't straight away go into the details, because it's so easy to then become really overwhelmed. So look at things top down, see that there's a story, because at the end of the day, that's what my examiners wanted to see from me. There was a story. So, and I guarantee you'll feel so much better after doing that.
I love this. Yes. Amazing. That sense of how to counteract overwhelm. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Sajni, thank you so much. There's so much good stuff in there. As I say, we all need your telephone number, basically, to call you up. Really brilliant. And thank you so much for your generosity of spirit in sharing this. I really appreciate that. And thank you also for the amazing work that you're doing on working on cancer. This is amazing.
Thank you.
You're continuing that work, and what important work it is. Thank you for that. And thank you all for listening.